The chamber of the Galactic Council was vast, filled with silver walls and glowing blue lights. Representatives of many alien species sat in tall chairs, their faces cold and expressionless. They gathered to decide the fate of a small colony on the edge of the galaxy. That colony was under attack by a ruthless alien race known as the defiance, creatures with burning ships and endless hunger for conquest. The voices of the council were calm, but without heart. One alien with crystal eyes spoke first. The colony is far away, too costly to save. We must think of resources, not weakness. Another alien, with scales shining under the chamber lights, added, if we send fleets there, we risk losing more. Better to let it fall. The decision spread across the room like cold fire, and the vote was quick. The council agreed. The colony would be abandoned. Far away, on the planet called Arena, the colonists gathered in shelters. They were a mix of species, some insect-like, some soft-skinned, some with horns or feathers. Yet all lived together in fragile peace. Now they watched the skies as Draven warships descended like shadows. The colonists had sent desperate messages to the council, begging for rescue. When a reply came, their hearts broke. The council had abandoned them. Fear filled the streets. Parents clutched their children. Old ones whispered prayers. The Dravans were known for leaving nothing behind but smoke and ash. It seemed the end had come. In the main shelter, a young alien girl asked her mother, "Will no one help us?" The mother had no answer. Tears filled her eyes. The people felt hopeless, betrayed by those who claimed to lead the galaxy. Their leaders had chosen safety over honor. The fire was coming, and no one would stand in its way. Then a signal broke through the noise. A message carried on rough human channels, filled with static but strong. "This is the United Terran Fleet," the voice declared. "We have received your call. We are on our way." At first, many colonists thought it was a mistake. Months. Why would humans come? The council had said no, and humans were only one small race among many. But the signal repeated, firm and steady. "We will not leave you to burn. Prepare for evac support. Hold on. Help is coming." Hope flickered where only despair had lived. The colonists looked to the skies again, this time searching for something new. Children whispered, "The humans are coming," as if it were a story told in dreams. But the adults knew this was not a dream. It was a choice, a promise. While the council abandoned them, the humans had stepped forward. Hours passed like years. Draven ships circled overhead, launching attacks that shook the ground. Colonists hid in tunnels and shelters, counting every breath. Then the sky lit up. From the darkness of space, human ships arrived, their engines burning bright. They came in formation, strong and defiant, like fire against the night. The colonists could hardly believe what they saw. These were not the largest ships in the galaxy, nor the most advanced. But the humans flew with courage, and every vessel moved like it carried the weight of honor. They did not hesitate, they did not turn away. They entered the fire. Inside one human ship, Captain Arlen Kane stood tall on the bridge. His voice was steady as he gave orders, "Shields up, weapons ready. We protect them at all costs." His crew answered with fire in their hearts. They knew the risk. They knew the council had abandoned this place. But they also knew the human creed. No one left behind. Down on the planet, colonists heard the thunder of battle above. They saw streaks of light cut across the sky as human ships clashed with Draven war vessels. The air shook with the sound of war, but this time, it was not the sound of despair. It was the sound of hope. For the first time, the people believed they might survive. In a dark bunker, the young girl asked her mother again, "Who are they? Why did they come?" The mother smiled through tears. "They are humans, child, and humans do not walk away." As the first night of battle began, the council's choice became clear. The galaxy had abandoned the weak, but humanity had stepped into the flames, and everything was about to change. The battle above Arena burned bright. Draven warships spread across the stars like shadows with teeth, their red lights flashing in the darkness. But into that fire, The human fleet had arrived, small compared to the Council's armadas, but fierce, steady, and unafraid. Every ship carried the weight of a promise, and every soldier carried the weight of honor. Captain Arlen Kane stood on the bridge of the flagship Resolute. His eyes followed the swarm of enemy ships, and his voice carried calm strength. "Lock formations, shield the planet, we buy them time," he said. His crew answered with fire in their hearts, hands moving across controls, ready for the storm. The first clash came fast. Draven cannons lit the void with burning plasma, streaks of red fire crashing into human shields. The ships shook, alarms rang, but the humans held. They returned fire with precision, every shot striking back like a hammer. The sky above the colony was no longer only death, it was defiance. Down below, the colonists looked up in awe. They could see fire streaking across the heavens, explosions painting the sky with terrible beauty. Some prayed, some cried, others whispered the same word again and again. Humans. They had expected silence, the slow ending of their lives. But instead, they heard the roar of engines and the thunder of battle. The humans had come for them. Inside the shelters, leaders of the colony argued in fear. "They cannot hold for long. They will fall like we would," one elder said. Another replied, "Why are they here at all?" The council said no. The council said this was hopeless. The words felt empty, because even as they spoke, the sound of human resistance echoed above. Hopeless? No, the humans were making hope out of fire. On the ground, the first human transports landed. Metal wings cut through the smoke, engines blasting dust across the ruined fields. From the hatches poured soldiers in dark armor, carrying rifles, eyes sharp and fearless. They spread out, securing perimeters, calling to the colonists with strong voices. "Stay calm. Stay together. We'll get you to safety." The colonists hesitated, staring at the humans. They were taller, broader, strange compared to many of the species there. But in their movements, there was no hesitation, only resolve. One soldier knelt before a group of alien children hiding behind rubble. He removed his helmet, smiled despite the battle raging, and said softly, "You're safe now, we've got you." The children, who had never seen a human before, reached out with small, trembling hands, and for the first time in days, they smiled. The Dravans pressed harder, their ships descending, unleashing waves of fire across the fields. Human soldiers met them on the ground, taking positions, returning fire with discipline. The battle was uneven, numbers against willpower, machines against courage. But every time a human fell, another took their place. They fought not for themselves, but for those they had never met, those the council had cast aside. In the chaos, Captain Kane's voice carried across comms. "Hold the line, no retreat, they depend on us." His words were not grand speeches, but they carried a fire that spread through his forces. The humans did not fight because they had to, they fought because they chose to. The colonists began to notice. Humans bled, humans fell, but they never abandoned each other. One wounded soldier dragged a comrade through fire, refusing to let him die alone. Another shielded a group of alien civilians with his own body, taking the blast so they could run. This was not strategy, this was something deeper, something the council had forgotten. In a bunker near the city, the young alien girl pressed her face to the window. Her mother pulled her back, but the child whispered, "They came for us, they really came." The mother could not answer. Her voice was lost to tears. No one in the colony had believed rescue would come. Yet here they were, strangers who fought as if this world were their own. The night burned with endless fire. Above, human ships weaved through swarms of Draven fighters, shields failing but spirits unbroken. Below, human soldiers turned ruined streets into strongholds, refusing to give ground. The colony had expected to die forgotten, but instead, they were watching a story that would never be forgotten. When the dawn came, smoke covered the horizon. Bodies lay across fields and streets, human and Draven alike. But the colony still stood, alive, because of the fire humanity carried in their hearts. The people of Arena knew the truth. The council had abandoned them. But the humans had come. They had stepped into the flames, and they had not flinched. The sky above Arena was no longer a sky of peace. It was a battlefield of fire. Human ships clashed with Draven warcraft in endless waves, the black of space painted with burning trails and sudden explosions. The colony below trembled with every impact. Yet within that chaos, a strange truth had taken root. For the first time since the Council's betrayal, the people of Arena felt hope. Captain Arlen Kane stood firm on the bridge of the Resolute. Every console flashed warnings. Every officer worked at the edge of exhaustion. Still, his voice never broke. Push forward, protect the ground forces, keep the Dravans from reaching the city, he ordered. The humans obeyed without hesitation, their ships weaving through storms of fire. One vessel was torn apart by enemy cannons, but even in death, it blocked the path of an attacking swarm. The sacrifice was noted by all, but the battle did not stop. Down on the surface, the humans had dug in. Ruined streets became barricades. Craters turned into cover, and every corner became a defense point. The Dravans descended with shrieks of metal, monstrous troops in black armor, storming forward. But the humans met them head-on, rifles blazing, voices shouting commands through the smoke. "Hold the line," a sergeant roared, his voice carrying across the chaos. Colonists who cowered in shelters heard that voice, and their fear began to shift into courage. The Dravans were stronger in number, their weapons burned brighter, but they lacked something vital. They fought for conquest, but the humans fought for lives. One by one, the colonists saw it. A human soldier dragged an alien family from rubble while firing back at the enemy. Another covered the retreat of civilians with nothing but a sidearm, refusing to yield until the last. Even the wounded refused to surrender, crawling back into the fight, teeth clenched, refusing to let their comrades stand alone. In the council chambers, far away, the abandonment of Arena was discussed like a forgotten business deal. Reports came in, Draven fleets engaged with human forces, but the council dismissed them. "They will die soon," one alien representative sneered, "and then the problem will solve itself." But the council was wrong. The humans did not die, they endured. They turned every loss into fuel, every sacrifice into a reason to fight harder. The colonists began to step out of the bunkers, drawn by the sound of defiance. At first, they only carried food and water to the human soldiers. Then some began to move the wounded or help build barricades. The courage of the humans was a fire, and it spread into the hearts of those who had once given up. A fragile unity was being born in the flames. On the battlefield, Captain Kane's voice came across every comm. "Remember why we are here, not for glory, not for conquest, but because they needed us." The words echoed like steel through the ranks. Every soldier who heard them felt strength in their bones. The Dravans charged again, monstrous and unrelenting. But the humans stood tall, rifle steady, eyes sharp. They did not run. They did not yield. Night fell across Arena, and the fires painted the horizon red. The colonists gathered in silence, watching humans fight for them. The young alien girl who had once asked, "Will no one help us?" now whispered a different truth. "They fight for us, even when no one else would." Her mother placed a hand on her shoulder, tears shining in her eyes. "Yes, child, they fight as if we are their own." The Dravans pressed harder, sending waves of troops into the streets. Explosions shook the colony, buildings crumbled, and yet the humans refused to break. Their commander on the ground, Major Rylan Voss, shouted over the noise, "We hold this city or we die with it." His men and women answered with fire, their rifles blazing, their will unshaken. For every Draven soldier that stepped into the streets, a human answered with defiance. The cost was heavy, but the message was clear. Humanity had not come to survive. They had come to protect. And in that fire, the story of Arena was being written. By dawn, the colony still stood, scarred and battered, but unbroken. The humans had not only entered the fire, they had carried others through it. And as the council ignored them, and the Dravans pressed closer, one truth became unshakable. Humanity was not like the others. They would bleed, they would burn, but they would never walk away. The battle for Arena raged without pause. By the third night, the colony was no longer a city of homes and markets. It had become a fortress of fire and broken stone. Human soldiers fought in every street, their armor scorched, their voices hoarse, their faces tired but unbroken. The Dravans came in waves, endless, merciless, and every hour demanded a price in blood. Major Ryland Voss walked the shattered streets with his rifle slung across his shoulder. He passed wounded soldiers who refused to leave their posts. One man leaned against a wall, his leg bleeding badly, yet he still reloaded his weapon with shaking hands. Ryland knelt, pressing a hand on the soldier's shoulder. "You've done enough," he said. But the soldier shook his head, eyes burning with defiance. "Not until they're safe," he whispered. The word struck Ryland deeper than any wound could. Human valor came at a terrible cost. Bodies were carried back from the front lines, wrapped in makeshift cloths. Every name was recorded, every face remembered. There was no council to honor them, no great hall to sing their deeds. But their brothers and sisters remembered, and the colonists began to remember too. The colonists had once looked at humans with doubt, wondering why they had come. Now they looked at them with reverence. An alien father carried water to the barricades, watching a young human soldier bleed, but still smile as he gave his ration bar to a hungry child. An insectoid healer worked beside a human medic, their hands moving in unison over the wounded. Even in the darkest hours, humanity inspired others to rise. But valor always demanded payment. On the fourth day, the Dravans unleashed their heaviest assault. Massive war machines stomped into the colony, their cannons tearing apart buildings in flashes of fire. Human soldiers scrambled, setting traps, laying charges, shouting warnings. "Bring them down, no matter the cost," Major Voss ordered, and the humans obeyed. They leapt onto the machines, planting explosives even as plasma fire cut them down. Each explosion toppled another giant, but each fall claimed brave lives. In the shelters, the colonists heard the thunder of battle and the silence that followed. When the smoke cleared, the wreckage of Draven machines littered the streets. But so too did the bodies of human soldiers. The price of valor was written in blood across the stones of Arena. One colonist leader, Elder Terran, stood before the survivors, his voice trembling. "We were abandoned by the council, left to burn, yet the humans came, and now they bleed for us." His words spread quickly, whispered from bunker to bunker, from child to parent. The colonists no longer asked why humans had come. They asked how they could stand beside them. In the command center of the Resolute, Captain Arlen Kane listened to casualty reports. His jaw was tight, his heart heavy, but his voice remained steady. "Every life lost here is the proof of our promise. We do not leave them. We do not walk away." His officers nodded, carrying that weight with him. They knew the council would never send reinforcements, but they also knew humanity's legacy was being written in the fire of this world. That night, human soldiers stood shoulder to shoulder with alien colonists. The lines between savior and saved began to blur. An alien youth carried ammunition for a human squad. A farmer picked up a fallen rifle and joined the line. The humans had shown what it meant to stand, and the colony began to stand with them. Yet even with unity, the cost grew higher. Every hour demanded courage. Every step forward demanded sacrifice. The humans bore it with silence, with grit, with unshakable hearts. But they knew what others did not. Valor was never free, and every victory had a price. At dawn, smoke covered the horizon once more. The humans stood bloodied but unbroken. The colonists looked upon them not as strangers, but as brothers and sisters in the fire. They would never forget the day humanity taught them the meaning of valor. They would never forget the price that had been paid. The colony of Arena was scarred beyond recognition. Houses lay in ruins, streets burned with black ash, and the once green fields had become graves of smoke and steel. For days, the Dravans had pressed their attack, each wave stronger than the last. The humans had held the line, but the cost was nearly unbearable. Captain Arlen Kane stood at the edge of the holodeck aboard the Resolute. The glowing map showed swarms of red markers, Draven ships still circling the skies. Human fleets had been thinned, too many ships lost, too many crews gone. Yet his eyes burned with resolve. "We have held the fire. Now we must turn it," he said. His officers, bruised and weary, looked at him with silent trust. Down on the surface, Major Ryland Voss moved through the barricades. Human soldiers and alien colonists now stood side by side. Where once the colonists hid in fear, now they carried rifles, passed ammunition, and patched wounds. They'd seen the humans bleed for them, and they no longer wanted to hide behind walls. Ryland's voice carried across the ruined square. "We fight together now, one line, one people." Cheers answered him, weak at first, but growing into a roar. The Dravans prepared for another crushing strike. Massive carriers descended, their shadows swallowing the horizon. Colonists looked up with dread, certain this would be the end. But then, across the comms, a new voice broke through the static. "This is the Second Terran Fleet, responding to Arena's call." The sky erupted with light. From hyperspace, more human ships burst into the system, engines burning bright. They were battered from other battles, patched and scarred. But they came anyway. The colonists gasped, their voices rising in disbelief. They came, more humans came. The Dravans, who had believed humanity broken, now hesitated. Their overwhelming numbers were not enough to silence this new defiance. Human ships formed walls of steel and fire, cutting into the invaders with precision. The battlefield shifted in a single heartbeat. For the first time, the Dravans began to fall back. On the ground, the humans surged forward. Major Voss led the charge through ruined streets, colonists running at his side. Grenades tore into enemy machines, rifles flashed, and the roar of defiance shook the very earth. Where once there had been fear, now there was fury. Where once there had been despair, now there was hope. The colonists themselves became the unexpected weapon. Guided by human commanders, they used their knowledge of the city to strike from shadows. An insectoid miner led a squad through underground tunnels to flank enemy forces. A group of farmers rigged irrigation pipes into explosive traps. The Dravans found themselves fighting not just humans, but a united colony. Captain Kane watched from the bridge as his fleets drove deeper into the enemy lines. Every ship moved as if bound by one unshakable will. He knew they were still outnumbered, still at risk of collapse. But he also knew something had changed. The Dravans no longer faced prey. They faced a people who refused to break. Above the battlefield, one Draven warlord roared into his comms. "Crush them, crush the humans before they spread their fire." But it was too late. The fire had already spread. In the shelters, the young alien girl who had once cried in fear now stood at the window with pride in her eyes. She whispered to her mother, "They will win. I know they will." Her mother held her close, tears on her cheeks, but this time they were tears of hope. As the sun rose over the broken colony, the Draven retreat began, not in full flight, but in hesitation, in cracks across their once unstoppable lines. Every step back was paid for by human valor. Every push forward was carried by the unity of species who had once been abandoned. Arena still burned, but within the fire, a turning point had come. Captain Kane stood tall as he looked at the stars filled with both wreckage and resolve. "This is not the end," he said. "This is where it begins." His words carried beyond his ship, beyond the soldiers, beyond the colony itself. They became a promise written in the smoke and blood of Arena. Humanity had turned despair into defiance. They had turned abandonment into alliance. And in the darkest fire, they had found the turning point. The battle for Arena finally slowed. The skies that had burned with fire now hung heavy with drifting wreckage. Broken Draven ships spun lifeless in orbit, their hulks glowing faintly as they fell into the atmosphere. On the ground, the colony lay scarred but alive, its streets filled with smoke and silence instead of screams. Human soldiers moved through the ruins with weary steps. Their armor was dented, their weapons scorched, their eyes tired from endless nights of fire. Yet they stood, they endured. They had not come for glory. They had come so that others would live. Now, those others began to rise from the shelters, blinking at the dawn as if seeing light for the first time. The colonists walked the streets in disbelief. They saw human soldiers lifting rubble to free the trapped. They saw medics tending not just to humans, but to every wounded creature. A child with feathers clung to the arm of a human nurse, refusing to let go. An insectoid healer whispered, "You fight like demons, but you heal like kin." And for the first time, the people of Arena smiled. Major Ryland Voss stood at the heart of the colony, his uniform torn and stained. Beside him stood alien leaders who had once argued in fear. Now they bowed their heads in respect. "You bleed for us," Elder Taryn said softly. "We will never forget." Ryland looked at the faces around him, humans and aliens alike, and answered with steady words. No one should stand alone in the dark. But the victory was not without weight. Rows of human dead lay in silence, their comrades standing guard in quiet honor. The colonists helped dig graves, their hands trembling as they placed flowers or stones. For every name spoken, there was a story, and those stories became part of Arena. Children whispered them like prayers, adults repeated them like vows. These humans had come as strangers, but they left their mark as family. Up above, on the Resolute, Captain Arlen Kane watched the world through the viewport. Reports of losses filled his ears, yet so did the voices of survival. He knew what the council would say. They would call this waste, they would call this reckless. But Kane also knew the truth. The people of Arena still lived, and that was worth every sacrifice. Across the galaxy, whispers spread. Merchant ships carried tales of humans who stood where the council would not. Refugees spoke of soldiers who shielded alien children with their own bodies. In marketplaces and taverns, the story grew. When the council abandoned Arena, it was the humans who stepped into the flames. In the council chamber, unease stirred. Representatives frowned as reports of humanity's defiance filled the air. They disobeyed our order, one voice said. They risked the balance of the galaxy. Another replied with sharp anger. And yet they won, and the people praised them. The chamber filled with silence, heavy with shame. For the council knew their betrayal was carved into history, while humanity's courage was carved into legend. Back on Arena, the colony began to rebuild. Alien hands worked beside human engineers to raise walls again. Burned fields were cleared, seeds planted once more. Hope grew where only despair had lived before. The colonists no longer called themselves abandoned, they called themselves survivors. And in every whisper of thanks, the name of humanity was spoken with honor. One evening, as fires burned low and stars filled the sky, the young alien girl stood beside her mother. She looked at the human soldiers resting nearby, their laughter soft, their faces scarred but warm. "Mother," she asked, "why did they come when no one else would?" The mother knelt, holding her close. "Because that is what humans are. Child, they do not walk away, even when the fire is too hot." And so the story of Arena became something greater than survival. It became proof that courage could rise from ashes. It became proof that when the galaxy turned its back, one species still carried the light. After the flames, the people of Arena did not stand in silence. They stood with a new vow. They would remember the humans. They would carry their legacy forward. The fires of Arena slowly faded into smoke and memory. Where once there had been ruins and despair, now there was rebuilding. Walls rose again, streets cleared, and life returned to places where silence had reigned. Yet one truth stood above all. The colony was alive because humanity had chosen to step into the flames. At the heart of the city, a monument was built. It was not of marble or crystal like the council's grand halls. It was made from steel fragments of fallen ships, human and Draven alike. At its center stood the figure of a soldier, head unbowed, rifle lowered, hand outstretched as if shielding those behind him. Beneath the statue were carved the words, "Here, humanity stood when all others walked away." Colonists gathered each day before the monument. Children laid flowers, elders spoke prayers. The names of fallen humans were read aloud, so they would not be forgotten. And beside every human name, colonists placed their own, for they knew they had been bound together in the fire. The monument was not only for the dead, it was for the living. It was a reminder that when the council abandoned them, humanity did not. Captain Arlen Kane stood before the monument one dawn. His uniform was worn, his face scarred, his eyes shadowed with memory. Major Ryland Voss joined him, silent for a long time. Finally, Ryland said, "We saved them, but at a cost we will carry forever." Kane nodded slowly. "That is the price of being human. We pay it because no one else will." Word of Arena spread like wildfire through the galaxy. Merchants whispered of the humans' courage. Refugees told stories of soldiers who fought for strangers as if they were kin. Songs were sung in taverns, poems written in quiet homes. The council could not silence it, no matter how they tried. The legend of Arena was beyond their control. On distant worlds, oppressed colonies began to ask, "Will the humans come for us too?" In forgotten outposts, soldiers whispered, "If we stand, maybe they will stand with us." The story was no longer only about Arena. It was about every world the council had abandoned. It was about a spark that could spread, a fire that could not be contained. In the chambers of the council, fear replaced arrogance. One representative muttered, "Humanity grows too bold. Their defiance spreads hope like a disease." Another replied bitterly, "It is not disease, it is loyalty, and the people no longer look to us, they look to them." The council shifted uncomfortably, knowing their authority had cracked. They had abandoned a colony, and in doing so, they had given humanity a stage. Now all the galaxy was watching. Back on Arena, the young alien girl who had once cried in fear now walked freely among the rebuilt streets. She carried a small piece of metal from a fallen human ship, tied to her neck with a simple cord. When asked why she wore it, she answered with steady words, "Because they saved me, and I will tell their story forever." Her voice was soft, but it carried the promise of a generation. The humans had not only saved a colony, they had planted seeds that would grow into something greater. As ships prepared to leave Arena, human soldiers stood in formation one last time. Colonists gathered to watch, tears shining in their eyes. Some begged the soldiers to stay. Others promised to build strong so their sacrifice would not be wasted. When the humans marched away, the people cheered, not as strangers, but as family, for they knew the bond would never break. Captain Kane gave his final words before departure. "Remember this, we came because no one else would, we fought because no one else dared, and we stood because no one else remained." His voice carried across the crowd, into every ear, into every heart. "This is what it means to be human," he said, and the colonists answered with one voice, "You will never be forgotten." As the human fleet rose into the skies once more, engines blazing like the dawn, the people of Arena lifted their eyes. They did not see ships leaving. They saw a legacy beginning. For humanity had shown them that courage was not measured by numbers, but by choice. And that choice had changed everything. The council had abandoned them, but humanity had stepped into the flames. And in doing so, they had written a story that would echo across the stars. A story of sacrifice, of valor, of unity. A story that would never die.